Life had a rhythm, predictable and steady, much like the tick of an old grandfather clock. I had mastered the art of routine at 34. My morning started early, preparing breakfast for my 5-year-old daughter, Chloe, and kissing my wife, Megan, before heading off to work. Our lives weren't extravagant, but they were comfortable. We had a modest home, laughter over dinner, and the promise of a family trip we hoped would heal the cracks that had started forming in our relationship. Megan was always the spark in our family. She'd fill the house with energy, whether it was through impromptu dance sessions with Chloe or her knack for turning ordinary weekends into adventures. But over the past few months, that spark had dimmed. It started subtly at first, less laughter, a distracted gaze during conversations. I thought it was stress. Megan had always been the type to internalize her worries. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. She'd retreat to our bedroom for hours with her phone, her fingers darting across the screen in rapid bursts. When I asked about it, she'd shrug and tell me it was work or an old friend reaching out. I wasn't one for confrontation. I'd been raised to believe in trust and patience. But something about Megan's growing distance gnawed at me. I'd catch her staring out the window, her face clouded with an emotion I couldn't name. It wasn't unhappiness exactly, but it wasn't contentment either. The promise of our upcoming family trip became my anchor. I believed, perhaps naively, that a change of scenery would reignite whatever we'd lost. One Friday evening, as Chloe sat on the floor, coloring pictures of our imagined vacation, I walked into the kitchen and found Megan staring at a note she'd been scribbling. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she quickly folded the paper and slid it into her pocket. I felt a pang of unease but said nothing. I didn't want to seem paranoid. The next morning, the house was unusually silent. I woke up to find Megan's side of the bed empty. Chloe was still asleep, her small body tangled in blankets. I walked downstairs, expecting to find Megan sipping coffee or reading, but instead, I found emptiness. The kitchen counters were bare, the usual clutter of her keys and purse conspicuously missing. I searched the house, my calls for Megan echoing unanswered. It wasn't until I opened the fridge to get milk for Chloe's breakfast that I noticed an envelope taped to the inside of the door. My name was scrawled across it in Megan's familiar handwriting. My stomach tightened as I pulled it free and unfolded the paper. The words hit me like a cold wind. Jack. I need to find myself. Please don't try to reach me. I'll come back when I'm ready. Take care of Chloe. Megan. My hands trembled as I reread the note, hoping I'd misunderstood. Her absence wasn't just an early morning errand, she was gone. My first instinct was denial. I checked the closets, the garage, even the backyard, but the evidence was undeniable. Her clothes were missing, and the family car was gone. Chloe's sleepy voice broke through my spiraling thoughts as she wandered into the kitchen, clutching her stuffed bunny. I forced a smile and hugged her tightly, fighting back the rising tide of panic. In that moment, 1,000 questions flooded my mind. What had driven Megan to this? Was it something I'd done? Was there someone else? And most pressing of all, how was I supposed to explain this to Chloe? The weight of Megan's words, her abrupt departure, felt like the first crack in a dam holding back a torrent of chaos. I knew I couldn't fall apart. Chloe needed me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Megan's disappearance was only the beginning of something much larger, and far more painful. The hours after Megan's departure passed in a haze. I kept myself busy, focusing on Chloe, whose innocent questions about her mom's absence were both heartbreaking and grounding. I couldn't afford to let my emotions spill over, not in front of her. But the silence of the house at night was suffocating. That's when the doubts crept in. Was Megan ever happy with me? Was there something I should have seen coming? I reached out to the one person I trusted to give me unfiltered advice, my brother Ryan. He listened quietly as I laid out everything, from Megan's growing distance to the note on the fridge. His first words weren't comforting. Instead, they were practical. He told me to protect myself. Megan's actions, as baffling and painful as they were, could have long-term consequences. Ryan suggested I secure our finances immediately. It felt wrong, almost like betraying her, but the logic was undeniable. Megan had left without warning, and I couldn't predict her next move. I spent that night combing through our joint accounts, transferring what I could to a separate one in my name. I left enough for her to access basic necessities if she needed them. It felt cold, calculated even, but it was a necessary step. Ryan assured me it was about safeguarding Chloe's future. The next few days were a blur of trying to maintain normalcy for Chloe while quietly unraveling the threads of my life. I tried not to think about Megan, but it was impossible. Late one evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and searched Megan's name on social media. My heart sank at what I found. There she was, smiling on a beach I didn't recognize. The caption read something about new beginnings, and was littered with hashtags about self-discovery and freedom. The photo wasn't taken by her, someone else had captured the moment, their presence hinted at in the reflection of her sunglasses. Her friends' comments were equally jarring. They cheered her on, calling her brave and inspirational. Not one mention of me or Chloe. I stared at the screen, my emotions swinging wildly between anger and despair. I'd been left to pick up the pieces of our lives, while she was basking in the glow of her so-called freedom. It felt like a slap in the face. The woman I'd built a life with was now unrecognizable. The next morning, Chloe asked again about Megan. Her big, trusting eyes searched mine for answers I didn't have. I told her that her mom needed some time to think about grown-up things but that she loved her very much. It was a half-truth, but the best I could manage. Chloe nodded solemnly and went back to coloring. I envied her simplicity. Behind closed doors, I was unraveling. My phone buzzed with messages from well-meaning friends and family, all wanting to know if everything was okay. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Megan's absence felt too raw, too personal to share. I kept returning to the image of Megan on that beach. It was a snapshot of someone I didn't know anymore. The woman in that photo wasn't the Megan I'd married. She wasn't the Megan who danced in the kitchen with Chloe or laughed at my terrible jokes. That Megan was gone, replaced by someone chasing a version of happiness that didn't include me. As days turned into weeks, I threw myself into routines. Chloe became my anchor, her laughter a small light in the darkness. But even as I tried to move forward, the questions lingered. Was Megan's departure a permanent escape or just a temporary detour? And what would I do if she never came back? I found myself drafting a message to Megan, something short and to the point. I didn't send it. Instead, I stared at the words, wondering if they would even reach her. She'd asked for space, and as much as it hurt, I had to respect that. For now, all I could do was wait, and hope that whatever she was searching for, it wouldn't come at the cost of our family. The house had started to feel like a shell of its former self. Every corner seemed to hold a memory of Megan, and every silence echoed her absence. I busied myself with Chloe, trying to keep our lives moving forward. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, questions about Megan's choices gnawed at me. I needed answers, even if I wasn't sure I could handle them. One evening, as Chloe slept, I sat at my desk sorting through paperwork. Among the usual bills and receipts, I stumbled across a folder with login credentials for an old email account Megan had barely used in recent years. Without thinking much of it, I logged in. At first, it was mundane, newsletters, outdated work correspondence, and spam. But then a thread of messages caught my eye. The subject lines were innocuous enough, but the sender's name, Jason, was unfamiliar. Curiosity outweighed my hesitation. I opened the emails and felt my stomach drop. The exchanges started casually, but as I read further, it became clear that this wasn't just a friendly correspondence. Megan had been chatting with Jason on and off for months. The tone of the emails shifted from polite to flirtatious, then downright intimate. The most recent messages were just weeks before she left, discussing plans that aligned disturbingly well with her disappearance. I scrolled through the inbox, finding more names. Jason wasn't the only one. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Megan hadn't just been drifting away from me, she'd been actively seeking something, or someone, else. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that she'd hidden it so well. My head swirled with thoughts. Was Jason the person in the reflection of her sunglasses in that photo? Were there others? I'd always thought of Megan as honest, even in our rough patches. But this felt premeditated, like she'd been building an escape plan while I'd been clinging to the hope of fixing our marriage. The following day, while cleaning out the attic to distract myself, I found another relic of the past, a photo album Megan had put together years ago. It was filled with snapshots of our lives, holidays, Chloe's milestones, and candid moments that once seemed so genuine. Flipping through the pages felt bittersweet until I reached the back, where newer photos had been tucked in. The first few were innocent enough, but then I froze. There she was, Megan, standing close to a man I didn't recognize. The setting was unfamiliar, but her expression wasn't. She looked carefree, leaning into him as though the weight of her old life had been lifted. My hands shook as I turned the pages, finding more of the same. This wasn't a spontaneous fling. Megan had been cultivating a new life, one that didn't include me or Chloe. I stared at the images, trying to reconcile the woman in those photos with the Megan I thought I knew. My mind flashed back to the family trip we'd planned. Had she ever intended to go? Or was it just a way to keep me distracted while she finalized her exit strategy? The betrayal felt deeper now, layered with a calculated cruelty I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just that she'd left, it was how thoroughly she'd planned to erase herself from our lives. Every discovery added a new weight to the realization that our marriage had been unraveling long before I'd noticed. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. That evening, I called Ryan. He'd been my rock through this mess, offering practical advice when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I told him about the emails, the photos, and the sinking feeling that Megan had been living a double life for months, if not longer. His silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes before he finally responded, urging me to focus on Chloe. But even as I tried to center my thoughts on her, I couldn't ignore the nagging question: what kind of person had Megan become, and how far had she gone to ensure her freedom? The answers felt like they were dangling just out of reach, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to pull them closer or let them slip away for good. Thanksgiving was a day I had been dreading. It wasn't just the holiday itself but the emotional weight it carried this year. My family had rallied around me since Megan left, filling the gaps she'd left behind. Ryan had taken over many of the roles she once held, helping with Chloe, offering advice, and simply being there. But there was an unspoken tension about what might happen if Megan decided to reappear. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The doorbell rang mid-morning, interrupting Chloe's excited chatter about the turkey she was helping decorate with her crayons. I opened the door, and there she was, Megan, as if nothing had happened. She looked polished, wearing a casual confidence that clashed with the chaos she'd left in her wake. Chloe's eyes lit up at the sight of her mother, and before I could react, she ran into Megan's arms. Megan hugged her tightly, whispering something I couldn't hear. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure of how to handle this sudden intrusion. But as Megan stepped inside, her demeanor made one thing clear: she wasn't here to apologize. The room felt smaller with her presence. My parents and Ryan exchanged uneasy glances, their disapproval palpable. Megan, however, seemed oblivious or simply uninterested. She focused on Chloe, chatting with her as though no time had passed. Her attempts at normalcy were jarring, almost surreal. It was as if she expected to step back into our lives without addressing the wreckage she'd caused. When Chloe went to show Megan her drawings, I finally spoke. My voice was calm, but the weight of my words hung heavily in the air. I asked Megan why she had come. Her response was maddeningly vague. She claimed she'd needed time, and that she had realized how much she missed her family. The anger I'd been holding back began to surface. I pointed out the months of silence, the emails, the photos with another man. I demanded to know if she had any intention of taking responsibility for what she'd done. Megan's expression shifted, but not to one of guilt or regret. Instead, she looked defensive. She deflected, saying she had been finding herself and that I couldn't understand the pressure she'd felt. My family, who had been silently observing, began to voice their support. Ryan, always the blunt one, pointed out that Megan's actions had been selfish and that her sudden return didn't erase the hurt she'd caused. My mother, usually the peacekeeper, couldn't hide her disappointment. Even my father, a man of few words, asked Megan if she'd thought about what her absence had done to Chloe. The room felt charged, emotions spilling over in every direction. Megan's confident facade began to crack, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She claimed she'd been unfairly judged and that everyone was ganging up on her. Her inability to see the situation from anyone else's perspective was staggering. That was the moment it clicked for me. Megan wasn't going to take responsibility. She wasn't capable of acknowledging the damage she'd done. Her return wasn't about fixing our family, it was about easing her own guilt or perhaps reclaiming control. Whatever the reason, it wasn't for Chloe or me. I took a deep breath, knowing what I had to do. I calmly told Megan that while she would always be Chloe's mother, she couldn't simply walk back into our lives without making amends. I told her that I wouldn't stand in the way of her relationship with Chloe, but she needed to prove that she deserved a place in her life. Megan's reaction was predictably defensive, accusing me of trying to turn Chloe against her. But I held my ground, supported by my family's unwavering stance. Chloe, thankfully, was too young to fully grasp the tension, but I knew these moments would shape her understanding of trust and accountability in the years to come. As Megan left, her departure felt different this time. It wasn't just her leaving the house, it was the realization that the life we'd built together was truly over. For the first time since she'd walked out, I felt a sense of clarity. Megan's choices didn't define me or Chloe. Our future was ours to shape, free from the shadows of her indecision and betrayal. The weeks following Thanksgiving were a whirlwind of adjustment and self-reflection. Megan's sudden reappearance had shaken the fragile equilibrium I'd built for Chloe and me, but her departure left a sense of finality. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of unanswered questions. Still, life wasn't without its surprises. One chilly December evening, as I was helping Chloe string lights on our small Christmas tree, my phone buzzed with a message from Megan. It wasn't her usual vague pleasantries or cryptic attempts at communication. This time, it was direct, she wanted to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She arrived the next day, looking worn, her confidence replaced with something closer to desperation. Megan began by recounting her struggles. She admitted that the life she'd tried to build after leaving had fallen apart. The man in those photos, Jason, had moved on, and her attempts at independence had led to financial hardship. She spoke of missed payments, mounting debts, and an overwhelming sense of regret. Her words were carefully chosen, laced with appeals to the family we once were. She asked to come back home. I listened, keeping my expression neutral, though inside, emotions churned. Part of me wanted to feel pity, to believe that she had learned from her mistakes. But the other part, the one that had watched her walk out without a second thought for Chloe or me, knew better. Megan wasn't here out of love or a newfound sense of responsibility. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. I told her no. Calmly, firmly, I explained that while I wouldn't stop her from being part of Chloe's life, she couldn't return to ours as if nothing had happened. I reminded her of the pain she'd caused, not just to me but to Chloe, who was too young to fully understand why her mother kept coming and going. Megan's face hardened at my refusal, and she accused me of being unforgiving. But I'd made my peace with that. Forgiveness didn't mean letting her back in to hurt us again. As she left, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was as though a door had finally closed, sealing off the chapter of my life defined by Megan's indecision and betrayal. The clarity I'd found on Thanksgiving solidified into resolve. Megan hadn't just left our marriage, she'd dismantled it piece by piece, and I wasn't willing to rebuild it for her. Over the next few weeks, I focused on Chloe and the future we could build together. I threw myself into creating traditions for the two of us, from baking cookies to visiting the local holiday market. Her laughter was the best reminder of why I needed to keep moving forward. She deserved stability, love, and a parent who put her first. And I was determined to be that parent. I began making changes, small at first but significant in their own way. I redecorated the house, replacing old memories with new ones that reflected our life now. I reached out to friends and started reconnecting with the world beyond the confines of my heartbreak. Slowly, the house began to feel like a home again, not the one Megan and I had shared but something new, something better. Looking back, I realized that Megan's departure, painful as it was, had given me a gift. It forced me to confront truths about our marriage that I'd ignored for too long. I'd clung to an image of what we were, blind to the reality of what we'd become. Her leaving wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a life that was honest and free from the weight of her choices. On Christmas morning, as Chloe opened her gifts with wide-eyed excitement, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I could be proud of. Megan's shadow no longer loomed over us. The past was where it belonged, behind us. Moving forward, I knew there would be challenges. Single parenting wasn't easy, and there were moments when I missed the partnership I'd once relied on. But those moments were fleeting, outweighed by the joy of watching Chloe thrive. I'd learned that happiness wasn't about having a perfect life. It was about building a life where love and trust were central, free from the toxicity of unmet expectations. As I tucked Chloe into bed that night, her sleepy voice murmured a question about whether Mommy would visit again. I told her the truth, in words a 5-year-old could understand. Mommy loved her, but she was figuring out her own life right now. And no matter what, Chloe would always have me. In that moment, I felt the weight of the past lift completely. Megan's choices had shaped the course of our lives, but they didn't define us. Chloe and I had our own path to walk, and for the first time, it felt steady and sure. The future was ours to create, and I was ready to embrace it. The finality of the divorce brought an unexpected sense of calm. As much as I dreaded the process, watching the legal dissolution of what Megan and I had once shared felt more like closure than loss. The judge's decision to grant me full custody of Chloe wasn't a surprise. Megan's financial instability and erratic behavior had spoken louder than any argument I could make. When it was all over, I walked out of the courthouse with Chloe's hand in mine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next year was a period of rebuilding. It was just Chloe and me, and though the challenges of single parenting were numerous, the rewards outweighed them. Chloe flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. She became more confident, her laughter filling the house like sunshine. We leaned on each other, creating a bond that was unshakable. The past had left its scars, but we were healing together. Life had a way of surprising me when I least expected it. A year after the divorce, I found myself at a birthday party for one of Chloe's friends. It was one of those chaotic but endearing events where kids ran wild while parents exchanged polite conversation. As Chloe played with her friends, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Emily, the aunt of Chloe's best friend. She had an easy smile and a warmth that immediately put me at ease. We talked about everything and nothing, from our shared love of old movies to the absurdity of kids' party games. By the end of the evening, I found myself looking forward to seeing her again. Chloe, ever the observant one, noticed. She was ecstatic at the idea of me spending more time with Emily, whom she already adored. What started as casual meetings turned into something deeper. Emily and I began dating, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. She was kind, patient, and, most importantly, she treated Chloe with the love and respect she deserved. Watching them together was like seeing pieces of my life fall perfectly into place. Months turned into a year, and our relationship grew stronger. When I proposed, it wasn't a grand gesture but a quiet moment that felt right. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. Chloe was my best girl, standing by my side with a smile that could light up the darkest room. Our family expanded soon after. Emily and I welcomed a baby girl, and Chloe couldn't have been more excited. She took to her role as a big sister with enthusiasm, showering her little sibling with love and attention. Seeing her so happy confirmed that the path I'd chosen was the right one. Our house, once filled with echoes of loss, now brimmed with laughter and life. Looking back, it was hard to reconcile the man I'd been with the man I was becoming. The pain of Megan's betrayal had once defined me, but it no longer held power over my life. Instead, it had taught me resilience and the importance of letting go. People make their choices, and those choices have consequences. Megan had made hers, and I had learned to move forward despite them. The lessons weren't just about loss but also about love. Real love wasn't perfect or painless, but it was honest and enduring. Emily embodied that for me, and together we were building a future that Chloe could look up to. For her, and for our new baby, I was determined to create a home where love and trust were the foundation. As I tucked Chloe in one night, she asked if I was happy. Her question caught me off guard, but my answer was immediate. Yes, I was happy. Not because life was perfect, but because it was real. We had weathered the storm, and now we were standing in the sunlight. Chloe smiled, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. In that quiet moment, I reflected on everything we'd been through. Megan's choices had set this journey in motion, but they didn't define its outcome. I had found strength in the chaos, built something beautiful from the wreckage, and emerged not just intact but better. The future stretched ahead, full of unknowns, but I no longer feared it. I had Chloe, Emily, and our growing family by my side. Together, we would face whatever came next, knowing that the past was behind us and the best was yet to come.